Let's talk about your own life and career path. And you've gone through your own dramatic change from criminal defense lawyer to life coach. When did you stop saying you were fine and build the life and career that you truly wanted and are proud of?
Well, there were a number of moments. I mean, I was a public defender in Manhattan for 4.5 years, absolutely loved it. And then my husband got into business school up here in Boston, Massachusetts at Babson, the entrepreneurial business school. And I could not get a job as a criminal defense attorney with the defender's office here in Boston because they weren't hiring. So I went to work for a law firm, and it was like committing slow suicide for a year and a half. I just had one of those jobs that was sucking the life out of me. And so what happened is I had a baby. I got pregnant. I had our first daughter. She's now 12 years old. And when I was on maternity leave, I had a panic attack about the thought of going back to that law firm when my maternity leave was over. So I think that was the first moment where I said, wait a minute, I am not fine being a lawyer. And in fact, people ask me all the time, how did you know? And I said, I just woke up one day and I knew I was done. When anybody asked me what I did for a living, I never wanted to answer the question by saying I was a lawyer. And so I didn't know what I would be doing. I just knew I didn't want to do that. And so I had exactly 2 weeks between that epiphany and when I was supposed to go back from maternity leave. And I did not graduate from the School of Trust Funds, so I had no choice. So I networked my fanny off, and I ended up getting an offer to go with a .com company doing strategy and some legal work. And so I spent almost 3 years working for this startup. It was an amazing experience, Darren. It was a company called eMode. They morphed into a company called Tickle, and then they were bought by Monster.com. And Monster wanted the company to move to San Francisco because that's where the venture capital firm was. And that was also where they could grow this company. And so that was one of those moments where life was presenting a choice. And the choice was, do I go with this job that I dig, or do I stay in the area of the country that I love? And at that point, I had 2 kids. I was also working crazy .com hours. And so I said to myself, now the second time, you know what? I'm not fine moving to San Francisco, and I'm not fine staying in the technology field. And I had a little bit of one of those crises where a lot of us have, where you think, well, what the hell am I doing with my life? So it was at that moment that I hired a coach. So I start working with this woman, and she says to me after a couple sessions, Mel, you really should become a coach. So she trained me, and it was in about 2001 or 2 that I officially became a coach, because there was a little bit of an overlap where I was, still working and the company was winding down, and I was telecommuting while I was training to become a coach. So I become a coach, Darren, and it was magic. You know how you have those moments in your life where things just click and it seems really easy? Mm-hmm. Those are moments to pay attention to. And so for the next 4 or 5 years, I had a private business and life coaching business. And what happened is I went to a seminar that Oprah was putting on, her Live Your Best Life seminar. And Martha Beck walked on stage. And I immediately said to myself, I want to be doing that. And that was the third moment where I decided I'm not fine where I am. Now, where I was satisfying, and where I was fulfilling, and where I was financially great. But all of a sudden I had this calling that there could be something larger. And so I decided that I would just, for a month, I would play a game where I would just do what Martha Beck would do. So any decision that came across my plate, I would ask myself, well, what would Martha Beck do? And that just led to a whole steamroll of things where ultimately I ended up on the cover of Inc. magazine. That led to a phone call from CNBC. I became a contributor at CNBC. And then, I walk into Sirius, and in one meeting, I land a morning drive show. And so I have this crazy chain of events, Darren, where everything, again, is really easy and it's happening super fast. And I'm realizing, wow, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be taking all of my knowledge and expertise, my charisma, my personality, and I am supposed to be out in the media entertaining people and helping them to become more powerful and change their lives. And so that led to this media career. And after a year of working at CNBC and doing this radio show at Sirius and having this kind of partnership start to develop with Borders, I thought to myself, okay, what am I doing? Why am I doing all this? Because I'm not interested in becoming famous just for fame's sake. I'm a businesswoman first and foremost. So I'm not fine with just kind of showing up and doing a show for Sirius where I don't own the content and they have a rev split, but we're not really making any money. I'm not fine just being a contributor. I want my own show that I'm in control of the content of. And so it was at that point that I took a step back and said, you know what? I'm going to start a company. I'm going to start a company that creates media. And I got my 2 business partners, and here we are today.
It is interesting how when it's right, it is easy. And things just start lining up and the doors start opening and the stepping stones start falling in front of you. And so,
well, you write about this in the compound effect. That's what the whole thing is about how those tiny little steps that you push forward start creating small momentum that builds and builds and builds and builds. That's how everything's done.
Yeah, truly. So now, Mel, all this hard work has accumulated into a very successful radio show, which you're fabulous at. And you've got this new TV show that you are in the midst of producing right now. And then you're a columnist for Success. And now this is your first book. So
yes.
Tell us what motivated you to write this book and then why now?
I knew I wanted to have something that was much more, much more impactful or lasting than simply the conversation on air. And so I was sitting in church about 3 years ago, and there's this renowned theologian by the name of Peter Gomes. And Peter Gomes is the head of the religious school at Harvard University. And in the middle of the sermon, he says, I have grown tired of who I am. I'm tired of my excuses. I'm tired of my small-mindedness. I know, and he has this incredible voice, I know there's something greater in store for me. If I could only get out of my own way. And his baritone voice was shaking, and as he said this, there was this collective exhale among all the overachievers and brainiacs, and it was as if this renowned theologian admitting something that we all feel gave everyone permission to admit the same things to themselves. And then a couple weeks later, I read this study that 1/3 of American men and women are dissatisfied with their lives. That's 100 million people. And so because of those 2 instances, I decided that I would tackle the very boring and the very difficult and dry subject of adult malaise. What does it mean to get stuck in life? Why is it that 1/3 of us wake up at some point and say, is this all there is? I didn't realize being an adult was going to be like this. And what you can do to shake out of it.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the details in your book. In the first chapter, you write that the powerful you is always there waiting, like a light switch inside that needs to be turned on. So describe for us what exactly is the more powerful us in your view.
We were just talking about this earlier, about how there are those times in your life where things are just clicking and you feel like you have momentum and you feel stronger and excited and proud of yourself. That's the more powerful you. The person that is on fire, the person that takes risks, the person that has momentum in life. And every single human being has that inside them and has had moments where they've felt really connected to the power inside them. But I think life has a way of just sort of knocking you down.
So if we want to put our finger on that light switch to flip it on, it's not an automatic thing. What do we have to do?
There's basically 3 very simple steps. If your power's on, you know it. Obviously, there are people in your life that radiate. So the way that if you've got it, you know it. If you don't got it, if you're feeling like you're dragging, then the way that you turn it on is first off by telling the truth. you're not fine. You got to fess up about what's truly bugging you about either your life or your career or your marriage or your body. Instead of walking around like it's all okay and putting on a happy face, get real. That's step one. And then step two is you have to, and this is the hardest part, Darren, and it's so funny because it seems so easy. You have to get clear about what you want, period. What is it that you want?
So what's number 3?
Well, number 3 then is, here's the deal. Like, this is the bulk of the book. The bulk of the book is about educating you about how your own brain betrays you. So if you can fess up that you're not fine, and if you can get clear and truly admit that thing that you'd really love to be doing, now you got a real problem. And the problem is your brain does not want you to be doing anything different than what you're currently doing. It views it as dangerous. And so it will do all kinds of nasty, mean, awful things in order to try to keep you stuck on the track of life that you're on. And so the third piece of it is to constantly force yourself to take the action, to constantly force yourself to do things you don't feel like doing. To basically, step 3 is you got to outsmart your brain.
So we're going to spend probably the rest of the interview talking about number 3. So let me jump into this one. It's at the beginning of the book, and quite frankly, I've had to come to terms with this every morning myself. And that is the significance about the snooze button, the metaphorically as well as the reality of the snooze button. So tell us about that.
The snooze alarm is a huge piece of what I'm talking about because it's a metaphor for how most of us are in our lives. So if you think about it, what's the first decision that you make every morning? For most of us, it's, I'll go back to bed. And so I tell readers that one of the first things I want you to do, and as you're listening to this, I invite you to do this tomorrow, is take the snooze alarm test. And what the snooze alarm test is tonight, set your alarm. And tomorrow morning, when the alarm goes off, instead of hitting snooze, I want you to throw the sheets off of yourself, and I want you to stand up in that cold bedroom. And the reason why I want readers to do this, Darren, is because it introduces you to something that neuroscientists call activation energy. Activation energy is the name for the brute force that is required to get yourself to move in a new direction, to get your mind off of something that it wants to do and onto something that you need to do. So why I ask readers to do this is because most of us don't realize that the force required to get yourself out of bed is the exact same emotional force that's required to stick to a diet. It's the exact same emotional force that's required to push yourself away from the computer and out the door to exercise. It's the exact same emotional force that's required to push yourself to pick up the phone and make that cold call you've been avoiding. It's the exact same emotional force that's required to do anything that's going to be new. And if you're planning on moving your life, your business, your relationship, or your body out of a comfort zone and toward greatness, you are going to have to master what the force is in terms of the activation energy required to shift yourself.
So in taking action and combating our instinct to resist, talk to us about the 5-second rule, because I think this is great. In the compound effect, I talk about, creating a miracle moment to make the right choice.
Yep.
So when this resistance is building up, tell us what the 5-second rule does.
So the 5-second rule is another thing that I got from all this research in neuroscience. And, your brain can basically process somebody else's expression in 33 milliseconds. So it's capable of making snap judgments. And so the 5-second rule is a rule that I want you to adopt, whereby the second you have one of those miracle moments that you talk about, Darren, or you've got a game changer idea, within 5 seconds, you have to take action. If you don't, the idea disappears. And here's how it works. Let's say you got somebody that's on your team that's not pulling their weight. And you have that moment like, I need to say something. And instead of saying something, what do? You do their work for them. And within 5 seconds, if you don't take action on any idea, it will disappear, period. And it's very powerful.
So Mel, let's go back up to number 2, because this is where I see a lot of people having roadblocks. They really don't know what they want, and they can't figure out how to decide or how to unearth those great desires from within them. So in the book, you talk about looking at the big picture and creating a map. Give us the guidelines you've developed for creating our maps.
In terms of a map is a tool that I have that I use with people in order to unhinge their thinking. Most people think in step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, and they never get started in taking action because they're so busy thinking about the right way to go about things. That's number 1. Number 2, a lot of folks don't understand just how many different ways you can come at getting the thing that you want. So what a map is a way for you to coach yourself in the 1,000 of different ways there are to start on your idea right now. Right now. And in the book, I walk you through, I think it's like 8 or 9 different types of things you can be doing in order to fill out your map. So for example, one action that you could take if you were interested in launching a granola business or canning your grandmother's tomato sauce recipe and selling it is you could find a dozen blogs that document the process that somebody else is going through doing the same thing. You could walk into a bookstore and buy 1, if not 2, 3, or 4 of probably a dozen books that are sitting on the shelves of a bookstore right now about that exact subject. You could ask all your friends if they know anybody that's done this. You could research networking groups online and join one. You could start making your sauce and canning it and giving it away to friends. You could start holding focus groups. You could Google and figure out where a natural food show is going to be and go check it out. You could get a job at a local company that is in the food service business to learn the ins and outs of how you actually do something like this. And so anytime you're sitting at home and you're saying to yourself, well, I don't know what to do. You pull out your map and you're like, okay, pick one. Any one of these things will bring you closer to what you want than what you're doing right now. Mm-hmm. Turn off the frigging TV and start investing in your life. Sorry.
So you have a...
I get a little passionate about this.
That's good. That's what we want. You have a few tests to determine, whether it's the right thing. And I love these. So I just want you to expound on these. Test 1 is it embarrassing? And test number 2, is it selfish and a little crass? Talk to us about that.
Absolutely. So here's the thing about life change. It ain't easy. And you're never going to feel like it. And so if you're going to try to do something to change your life or to grow your business, you better be darn sure that you personally are motivated. So the first test of whether or not your idea is great is, and this is how you do it. So, ask yourself, well, what do you want? And I say this to people all the time. Well, tell me what you want. And people say, well, I want to be healthy. But what the hell does that mean? You want to be healthy. Well, I'd like to lose a few pounds. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. How many pounds? 40? Come on. What's the real number? The real number? The real number. How much weight do you want to lose? It's 60. Now, 60, that's a start, Darren. And the reason why it's a start is because now we're getting somewhere. The person who said they wanted to lose 40 and is now admitting it's 60 was embarrassed by the real number. You better be embarrassed by what you want. That's how big I want it to be for you. So if you have launched a cosmetics line and you want to become a global brand as big as Bobbi Brown, it would be embarrassing to say that to your friends at a dinner party. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, and number 2 is once you've nailed down that embarrassing thing, that big vision, you got to hone it a little bit. And you got to make it selfish and a little crass. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. So let's take the example of somebody who is, wanting to they started off by saying they wanted to be healthier. You finally get them to admit that, no, it's not 40 pounds, it's actually 60 pounds. Now the question is, why? Why do you want this? Why? And that answer has to be selfish and crass. And the reason why is if it's not a selfish enough reason, and if it's not crass, meaning getting right down into what truly motivates human beings, you will not force yourself to do it. Anybody that says they want to lose weight to be healthy is lying, and that is not a good enough reason to motivate yourself. Selfish and crass in the example of somebody wanting to lose weight would be, and this is the cleanest possible way to say it, you know what? When I take off my shirt and I see my man boobs or I see my muffin top, I am so unattracted. I am not having the intimate life with my spouse that I want to. I'd like to have a hot, juicy, romantic, intimate life with my spouse again. And until I lose this weight, it's not happening because I don't want to take my t-shirt off in my bedroom. That is a reason to stick to a diet. Getting healthy, not so much.
So in chapter 7, step 3 starts off with go public with what you want, something I believe in as well. But talk to us about why it's important.
Why it's important to go public is because if you keep something trapped in your mind, you'll just analyze it to death and you'll never take action. When you take the specific step of going public, which means find a human being, sit down and tell them what you're doing and ask for their advice. One of the reasons why this is so important, Aaron, is because when you speak to somebody else, it becomes real. When you ask for advice, you are now given actions to take. And you have somebody that can help hold you accountable and that can check back in with you. It becomes real when you go from your mind and the privacy of your laptop into a real conversation. That's why it's important to go public.
Yeah. Really, what I think it is people lack integrity with themselves, and so they have to tell somebody else, and they'll actually be more accountable to somebody else than they will be with themselves. Right or wrong, which I think it's wrong, but that's the way it unfortunately ends up working.
Yeah, I think that's true too. And I have this saying that when you're in your head, you're behind enemy lines.
Yeah, exactly. So Mel, as we wrap up here, I'd love for you to boil everything we've talked about down to your very best takeaway. If somebody could just walk away with the one thing and start working on it today, this week, that would have the biggest impact, that 6 months from now, and they look back at this interview and go, that one thing, that made all the difference in the world.
Right.
What would that be, that one thing you'd want people to sort of focus on?
The one thing I want you to take away is you're never going to feel like it. Stop waiting around. Stop waiting around for motivation. Stop waiting for someone else to do it. Stop waiting to feel like it. The difference between people that feel stuck and people that feel powerful and great in their lives is that the people that feel powerful and great get up in the morning and do the stuff they don't feel like doing so that they can have what they want. It's really that simple.
Fantastic. Well, this is Mel Robbins. As always, pleasure to have you here. You are truly a valuable part of the Success family, and we appreciate all the fabulous insights that you bring to the table each and every month, and certainly the great ones here as part of this interview. Thanks so much.